His thinning white hair, and behind his simple wire-rimmed glasses, his faded blue eyes missed nothing. What no one at the mall knew, what almost no one in civilian life ever knew, was that James had spent 25 years in the most elite special operations unit in the U.S. Navy. As a former SEAL team operator, he had participated in classified missions across 4 continents, earned multiple Purple Hearts, and mastered combat techniques that can incapacitate opponents in seconds. After retiring from active duty, James had dedicated himself to helping fellow veterans navigate the often confusing system of benefits and support services. 3 years ago, he had convinced Riverside Mall management to donate a small office space for a Veterans Assistance Center where he volunteered twice weekly to help veterans with paperwork, counseling referrals, and sometimes just lending an understanding presence to those who needed someone who truly comprehended their experiences. True strength is knowing when not to fight had been his mantra throughout his military career. It was what he taught the younger operators under his command and what guided his civilian life now. Violence was always a last resort, used only when absolutely necessary. The explosion in Vietnam that took his hearing hadn't diminished his resolve. If anything, it strengthened his determination to serve others in different ways. At home, James maintained his physical training regimen, modified for his age but still rigorous. His small apartment contained few decorations except for a folded flag in a display case and a single photograph of his old unit, faces blurred for security. He practiced Tai Chi forms every morning to maintain flexibility, despite his old combat injuries, and worked with weighted resistance bands to preserve his strength. The mall security team, led by the arrogant ex-cop Tucker Reed, had been a persistent annoyance since the Veterans Center opened. James had caught them mockingly mimicking sign language when they thought no one was watching. He'd read their lips calling it the dinosaur exhibit behind his back. But James had endured far worse during his career. He simply carried on with his work, helping one veteran at a time. Communication was his greatest challenge. The notepad he carried everywhere had become an extension of himself, along with the practiced hand movements of American Sign Language. Few at the mall bothered to learn even basic signs to communicate with him, treating his deafness as an inconvenience rather than simply another way of being the world. Riverside Mall was a sprawling 2-story complex of gleaming tiles, bright storefronts, and ambient music. The Veterans Assistance Center occupied a modest space next to the service corridor, far from the prime locations. The small sign on the door read, "Simply Veterans Assistance," in plain black letters, a stark contrast to the colorful backlit displays of surrounding stores. Tucker Reed and a security team operated from a high-tech office near the mall's main entrance. At 45, Tucker carried himself with the swagger of someone who believed the polyester uniform and radio made him untouchable. His team consisted of 4 younger men, all with similar attitudes, particularly his deputies Brian and Derek, who seemed eager to impress their boss with increasingly aggressive enforcement of mall regulations. The first incident occurred when James was helping an older Vietnam veteran with mobility issues navigate to the center. The man had accidentally knocked over a promotional display outside a jewelry store. "Hey, Grandpa!" Derek called out, approaching rapidly. "Can't you watch where you're going?" James couldn't hear the words, but he read Derek's lips easily enough. He helped steady his companion and pulled out his notepad, writing quickly, "It was an accident. We'll help clean it up." Tucker appeared, arms crossed over his chest. "We've got mall staff for that," he said slowly, exaggerating his mouth movements mockingly. "Maybe if you can't see where you're going, you shouldn't be here at all." James noticed the Vietnam veteran's face flush with embarrassment. He wrote another note. "Everyone deserves to be treated with respect, especially those who serve their country." Tucker snorted. "Yeah, well, this isn't the army, old man. This is my mall, and I say you need to move along before you break something else." James felt his jaw tighten but maintained his composure. He gently guided the Vietnam veteran toward the center. As they walked away, he could feel the security guards laughing behind them. Over the next 2 weeks, the tension with the security team steadily increased. They began performing routine checks of the Veterans Center multiple times a day, questioning credentials of veterans who came seeking help, and finding trivial violations of mall regulations to cite. "Your informational flyers are blocking the fire evacuation path. Brian claimed, removing the center's modest display from the wall outside their door. James pulled out his notepad and wrote, "That approved sign has been there for 3 years." "New management, new rules," Brian smirked, wadding up the flyers and tossing them into the trash while maintaining eye contact with James. The following day, Tucker informed James that veterans could no longer use the mall's main entrance near the parking area most accessible for those with disabilities. He spoke deliberately slow, as if James could hear if he just enunciated enough. "Security concerns," he said with a shrug that didn't attempt to disguise his satisfaction. "You'll need to direct your visitors to use the service entrance near the loading docks." A young veteran who volunteered at the center translated Tucker's words into sign language, his hands moving angrily. James placed a calming hand on the young man's shoulder. James recognized the tactic. The steady application pressure designed to make the center's operations so difficult that they would leave voluntarily. He had seen similar approaches during counterinsurgency operations, though never expected to experience it in a suburban Virginia mall. The situation worsened when a veteran with a service dog was stopped at the entrance. Despite presenting proper documentation, Derek insisted the dog wasn't allowed. Mall policy, he claimed, though the Americans with Disabilities Act clearly protected service animals. James documented each incident meticulously. His training had taught him the value of intelligence gathering and patience. He sent formal complaints to mall management, but received only form responses promising to look into the matter. When a group of younger veterans wearing military-themed t-shirts visited the center, Tucker followed them throughout the mall, standing uncomfortably close and radioing loudly about suspicious activity. One of the veterans, a former Marine, wanted to confront him, but James signed firmly, "Not worth it. Document everything." The younger veterans were frustrated by James's patience. They didn't understand that he was gathering evidence, building a case, and waiting for the right moment. In special operations, timing was everything. Strike too soon and you lose the advantage. Wait for the perfect moment, and victory was assured. The situation came to a head when James arrived one morning to find the center's lock changed. Tucker stood nearby with his arms crossed, a satisfied smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Fire marshal inspection found some violations," he said, speaking slowly and loudly as a volume could overcome deafness. "Space is temporarily closed." James pulled out his notepad, writing quickly. "Without notice? That's not protocol." Tucker stepped closer, lowering his voice despite knowing James couldn't hear him. A young Afghanistan veteran named Kevin, who had arrived with James, translated the security guard's words into sign language. "Look, Anderson," Tucker said, "let's cut the crap. This mall isn't charity. Your sad little operation takes up valuable space and drives away real customers. Nobody wants to go shopping and be reminded of war and broken down old soldiers." James felt a familiar calm settle over him, the combat clarity he'd experienced in crises throughout his career. His hands moved and controlled, precise signs that Kevin translated aloud. "Those broken down old soldiers gave everything for people like you." Tucker laughed, a harsh sound that Kevin didn't need to translate. James could read the contempt in his face. "What exactly did you give, old man, besides wasting taxpayer money playing soldier? I've dealt with real danger as a cop. You military types love to act superior with your service talk. And what's with the silent treatment? Too good to speak up?" Kevin started to respond angrily, but James placed a restraining hand on his arm. He simply looked at Tucker, decades of discipline keeping his expression neutral despite the disrespect. He could have mentioned classified operations that had directly protected American citizens. He could have shown the scars from bullets and shrapnel. Instead, he simply turned to leave. "That's right, limp away," Brian called after him. "Just like you guys limped away from Nam, right?" 2 days later, James received an urgent text message from Kevin. The 26-year-old had been making progress with his PTSD, but today was struggling with a severe anxiety attack and needed to talk. James texted back immediately, telling him to come to mall, and they would find somewhere to meet since the center was closed. When James arrived, he found Kevin sitting on a bench near the mall entrance, visibly agitated, rocking slightly, his breathing rapid, hands clenching and unclenching. Before James could reach him, Tucker and Brian approached, Security radios crackling. "Sir, you're disturbing other customers," Tucker said to Kevin, deliberately positioning himself so James couldn't see his face to read his lips. James quickened his pace. Pulling out his notepad, he wrote quickly, "He's here to see me, having a medical issue." Tucker glanced at the note and smirked. "Your center is closed, remember?" he replied, turning to ensure James could see his exaggerated mouth movements. "And this guy is scaring people." Kevin's breathing was becoming more erratic. "I just need a minute," he gasped. "You need to leave," Brian insisted, reaching for Kevin's arm. James stepped between them, making a sharp, cutting motion with his hand. Though he couldn't speak, his expression conveyed a warning that made both security guards pause momentarily. He wrote rapidly, "PTSD episode. Don't touch him. Physical contact without permission could trigger a survival response." Tucker snorted, crumpling the note and dropping it to the floor. More military drama. "Listen, Grandpa, this isn't your territory. This man is creating a disturbance." When Brian grabbed Kevin's arm, the young veteran reacted instinctively, pulling away with a panicked cry. Tucker immediately shoved Kevin against the wall, while Brian drew his stun gun. "Stop," Kevin shouted, but was ignored as his panic escalated. James made his decision. Decades of training took over as he moved with a speed that belied his age. In one fluid motion, James struck the pressure point at Brian's wrist, causing the stun gun to clatter to the floor. Before Brian could register what happened, James had redirected his momentum and sent him sprawling with a subtle hip check. Tucker released Kevin and lunged at James, swinging wildly. James sidestepped with an economy of movement that characterized elite operators, using Tucker's own force to guide him face first into the wall with joint lock that immobilized him instantly. Derek appeared, rushing toward the commotion. James, still controlling Tucker with one hand, used his free hand to catch Derek's punch and redirect it into a wrist-control position that brought the younger man to his knees, gasping in pain but without lasting injury. Within 10 seconds, all three security guards were incapacitated. Tucker pinned against the wall, Brian sprawled on the floor, and Derek kneeling in a wrist lock. None were seriously hurt, just controlled with a precision that had made SEAL operators legendary. "When I release you," James signed, with Kevin translating in a steady voice, "you will step back, allow me to take my friend to get help, and reconsider how you treat veterans in the future. Are we clear?" The security guard stared at him with shocked expressions, suddenly seeing not a deaf, limping old man, but a warrior whose decades of combat experience had just been demonstrated with frightening efficiency. A small crowd had gathered, smartphones recording the scene in stunned silence. The mall had gone quiet except for the ambient music still playing cheerfully overhead. James maintained his holds effortlessly, his breathing barely elevated despite the exertion. He caught Kevin's eye and nodded reassuringly. The young veteran had stopped panicking, his attention now fixed on the scene before him. James released Derek first, motioning for him to move back. Then he released Brian, who scrambled away, rubbing his wrist. Finally, he released Tucker, stepping back to create distance. Tucker straightened his uniform, face flushed with a mixture of pain and humiliation. "You're under arrest," he started to say, but his voice faltered as James reached into his pocket. The crowd tensed. But James simply pulled out his wallet and flipped it open to reveal a military ID with classifications and security clearances that made Tucker's eyes widen. Next, it was a small card that read, "James Anderson, SEAL Team 6, Ret. Purple Heart recipient, combat disabled veteran." Kevin had moved to James's side and now spoke for him. He says, "You have two options. Option 1. Continue this confrontation and deal with the consequences, including federal charges for discriminating against disabled veterans. Option 2. Step back, let us help other veterans, and perhaps learn something about respect." The security guards looked at each other, then at the growing crowd of onlookers with their recording phones. Tucker's face had gone from red to pale as the realization of who he'd been harassing sank in. "Well, step back," Tucker said finally, his voice barely audible. By the following morning, mall employee group chats were buzzing with security footage of the incident. The video, captured by the mall surveillance cameras, showed with perfect clarity how an elderly deaf man had neutralized 3 younger security guards in seconds with movements so efficient they seemed almost casual. The mall's regional manager, Lisa Hartman, arrived for an emergency meeting with James. Unlike Tucker's dismissive attitude, Lisa was profusely apologetic. "Mr. Anderson," she said, making sure to face him directly so he could read her lips. "I had no idea about the harassment your center has experienced. The behavior of our security team was completely unacceptable." She slid a folder across the desk. Inside were documents outlining a new location for the Veterans Center, twice the size, near the main entrance, at the same donated terms. James accepted the offer with a simple nod, writing, "It's not about me. It's about respecting all veterans who come here for help." Word spread quickly throughout the mall. Store managers who had previously ignored James now greeted him by name. Several approached with offers of discounts for veterans or to donate products to the center. The most surprising development came 3 days later when Lisa requested another meeting. This time Tucker was present, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Mr. Reed has something to say," Lisa prompted. Tucker cleared his throat. "The company has placed me on probation, and rightfully so. My behavior was unprofessional and disrespectful." He seemed to struggle with the next words. "We also reviewed your military record, or what's available of it. I had no idea who you really were." James remained impassive, writing on his notepad. "Few people do. That's how I prefer it." Lisa suggested, and I agreed, that the security team could benefit from some training. Tucker continued, specifically in how to interact with veterans with PTSD or other service-related conditions, and basic sign language. "Would you consider conducting a workshop for us?" James studied the man's face, seeing genuine regret replacing the previous arrogance. He wrote, "I believe in second chances. First session starts Monday at 0800. Don't be late." The security training sessions became a weekly occurrence. James taught the guards about various combat-related conditions, proper de-escalation techniques, and how to recognize veterans in distress. To his surprise, Tucker proved to be an attentive student, often staying after sessions to practice sign language. After the 4th session, Tucker lingered until they were alone. "I never served," he admitted, signing slowly with newly learned hands. "Tried to enlist after high school, but was rejected on medical grounds. Spent my whole life compensating, I guess." James nodded, understanding the complex emotions behind the confession. He signed back, with Tucker following along. "Many paths to service exist. Not all require a uniform. That young man, Kevin, how's he doing?" Tucker asked, both speaking and signing. James smiled and signed. "Better. He's helping at the center now, mentoring other recent returnees." Tucker looked up, resolve in his expression. "I'd like to help too, if you'll have me. Maybe set up a regular security escort service for veterans with mobility issues. No charge, of course." Over the following months, a remarkable transformation occurred. The security team, once the center's adversaries, became its strongest advocates. Tucker personally cleared the regulatory hurdles for the center's expansion and organized a mall-wide Veterans Appreciation Day. At 70, James Anderson had never sought recognition for his decades of service, most of which would remain classified until long after his death. But as he watched veterans of all ages find support and respect within the community, he found a different kind of satisfaction than any mission had provided. True strength, he reflected as he watched Tucker patiently sign with an elderly Vietnam veteran, wasn't found in the ability to defeat opponents. It was found in the courage to change minds and open hearts. Have you ever witnessed someone standing up for what's right? Do you know a veteran with an untold story of strength and sacrifice? Share your respect in the comments below. Our veterans deserve our recognition and gratitude, regardless of whether their battles were fought abroad or continue silently at home.